Coming to you from Orange County, California, this is the Jug Life Podcast with Max Ada and Chad Wesley Smith. Hey everybody, Chad Wesley Smith here, bringing you another episode of the Jug Life Podcast. I'm joined as always, but this time from a distance, by T1000 Max Ada, the cyborg, joining us via FaceTime from Oakland. Max, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well after I merged my body with an Apple computer.
Did they teach you that at Facebook yesterday?
I went to Facebook and I became a robot.
I know they have been working on a lot of artificial intelligence stuff there, and Mark Zuckerberg.
I asked about that.
Yeah, I know. Elon Musk is very concerned about the AI becoming sentient and killing us all, but Zuckerberg doesn't seem to be as concerned.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've been to Facebook headquarters, like I have, you would see the intense security situation they have going on there. Quite a few rent-a-cops driving around the parking lot, I'm assuming looking for the AI that may have escaped, the T100.
Did they show you the room where the Terminator hand is stored? maybe that after today's clinic.
Yeah, you have to get security level certain clearance to see that stuff. But I'm almost there. After a deadlift clinic, I'll be at that level.
Yeah, so tell them about the clinics you're doing at Facebook.
We're doing like a squat clinic. So I can go in there. They've got a really pretty nice gym setup. They've got obviously what you'd expect a multi-billion-dollar company to have in terms of gym equipment and all this. And just going there and showing a bunch of people that actually work there squat technique and that kind of stuff. More basic, more just kind of general, how to squat, how to move properly. And it's pretty cool. It's a pretty good turnout, maybe about 50 people total. So it's pretty neat.
Now, were any of the Facebook employees, did any of them raise their hand to say that they competed in weightlifting or powerlifting?
Actually, a couple of them do. I was surprised. There's definitely some people that were doing weightlifting. One girl had a hassle-free shirt on. And she had said she'd been to one of our meets before. Uh-huh. And then a bunch of other people had done there's maybe a couple people that had done some powerlifting, but not anything I asked just to make sure who's squatting in over 600, and just not a lot of responses there. But it was, it's cool. It's neat to see that there's a lot of people in that tech sphere to do strength sports stuff.
Do you know how many employees Facebook has?
5,000, they told me.
I guess with 5,000 employees, there's got to be a couple of them that lift.
Yeah. I was waiting for the one guy who's well, I do starting strength and I do it like this. There's one guy at Facebook that tells everybody about his program, you know what I mean? To argue with me, but that didn't happen yet.
Well, he probably already knew what you were going to say. He knows. I mean, so he doesn't need to hear it from you.
No, of course not.
Actually, he's the one who's just writing Facebook algorithms to create fake accounts to troll people.
How many fake accounts do you think Mark Zuckerberg has? He's got to have.
He'd probably need some. I mean,
Zark Muckerberg. And it's just a picture of him wearing a hat.
I'm sure
maybe some glasses or sunglasses too.
I'm sure he has fake email accounts that are fuck the Winklevoss twins at AOL.com, something like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. He trolls the shit out of people on other social media platforms that he's competing with.
Just crushing people on Reddit left and right.
He's blasting people on Reddit on a daily basis. Personally.
So today we're going to be taking some questions, some Q&A from Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And today's podcast is brought to you by Mustaches and Muscle Ups. It's a lifestyle. And let's go ahead and get right into these questions. So the first question that we have, and we had a lot of questions to this effect, about the usefulness of bodybuilding type of training, hypertrophy training for weightlifting, how hypertrophy training fits in, and we'll just refer to that as general training for the purpose of this. But Max, talk about sort of the role of general training, how you see people maybe neglecting it, and then how you fit it into athletes training.
So the biggest role for things like there's kind of two main objectives with general training. One is you have things like what people are asking, like bodybuilding type exercises, like isolation movements, and then like what we would kind of refer to more as, or they might refer to as, like these higher rep, 8 to 10 plus rep sets of general exercises that are not specific, meaning squats, pulls, presses, etc. In these general phases of training early on, those things are emphasized because we're trying to build up the general work capacity, general strength, these things that build the foundation for the next blocks of training to happen. Most of the time, it seems like people get into a position where their training doesn't stray from the 3 to 5 reps in the general exercises range and heavy singles in the snatch and clean and jerk.
And just to clarify, when he says general exercises, squats, pulls, presses.
Right. So that's a big area where people kind of fall apart. I think they don't do enough. They don't move far enough away from that in the off season, the far out times of training away from meets, and because of that, they don't ever develop a bigger foundation. They don't ever develop the ability to train harder, the ability to do more work, and they don't bring these general qualities up a lot. If your squat is 200 kilos and you're doing 3 to 5 reps, same kind of set, same kind of reps for 10 years, and it doesn't really move up beyond 200 kilos, you haven't really done much. You're going to have to, at some point, build more muscle if you're getting, if you're going to improve in your abilities as a lifter. You can't be 6 feet tall and weigh 85 kilos. So these general phases, they cover a lot of different aspects of the sport or a lot of different aspects of the preparation that needs to happen. Building muscle, developing work capacity, laying a foundation for the next blocks of training to take place. The things like little bodybuilding exercises and such are going to be present in the program for most of the time, but their real main focus is on things like isolating weaknesses, imbalances, just giving a general balance to the training. If you don't ever do anything for your shoulders or upper back or triceps or biceps or anything, you can develop certain imbalances or weaknesses that could potentially create problems later. So that stuff is kind of shoring up small or heading off things that could potentially become a problem later. So in general, general training for weightlifting is geared around the basic qualities, right? The general qualities: limit strength, a little bit of muscular hypertrophy, jumping, throwing, basic exercises, basic GPP type stuff.
Yeah. So within that, and it's going to vary certainly by the lifter's ability. As someone who's been lifting for 15 years, their general training is less general than someone a 12-year-old who's just starting out. But coordination, general movement qualities like that will certainly be more and more included for a less experienced athlete. Right. And I feel like this is kind of deja vu, and I know I've said it. I know I've said this on here before, but people are going to watch and they're going to say, "Well, what about Bulgarian? What about Bulgarian?" And they say that they had all these strong lifters. Well, the people who are rallying behind Bulgarian on YouTube and stuff are not Max. He lived. There's a reason that he doesn't coach people the way that he trained for 13 years. Multiple max squats. That's why they call him Max. His name used to be Steven. But multiple max squats per day, every day for 13 years. They didn't say like, oh yeah, my friend did it for 3 months and his squat went up 20 kilos. Of course it did. Max's front squat went up 52 kilos in 6 weeks. And everyone's going to look at that and be like, well, that's enough stuff right there. But then it went up another 10 kilos like in the next 10 years or something. Yeah. It's a short term, it's maybe a peaking plan, but it's a short term return. Yeah. And other factors to consider with that: drugs, You can probably do just Bulgarian training or just very, very low volume training. The same thing would hold true for powerlifting if you're doing a very low frequency, very low volume, very high intensity program, but you take a shitload of drugs, then you can still have the necessary muscle for it. But no weightlifter in America, no weightlifter who's listening to this is in that boat. And And so often too, those athletes, when you hear about programs, Bulgarian training, even Smolov, Sheko, that different kind of stuff, that's only a snapshot of the elite part of the athlete's career, and it doesn't take into account the Soviet sports school, that type of training that happened for years prior to that, with extremely general training and that base building, because they don't, when you have a 25-year-old athlete setting world records, they write about the training that they do right then. They don't write about the training they did when they were 6.
Right. Well, it's also because everybody did that same training. When we talked to Ilya Ilin at the seminar 2013, he said he ran around doing all the exercises, but he also said he did, he used the Soviet system up until he was about 16 or 18 years old, which is about 10 years of training. Same with Dimas. He said they used the Soviet system, the system of phasic, general, a comprehensive system of training up until they were, basically on the national team or at very high level before they switched to anything different. And that's the story I've heard from almost everybody. It's very rare that somebody would start training in that style of training from day one and expect it to be successful.
And that's why I always thought that Max was like 10 or 15 years older than he is, because I would hear these stories about this mystical Max Montana character and be like, oh man, he squatted every day of his life for like a decade plus. So I always figured he started doing that when he was like 22 or 23 until mid 30s. Not the real story that he started doing that when he was 12.
Yeah. I was 22 when I was born.
So moving on to the next question, and this one is not so much a question, but is a bit more of a rant, and it's about how to ask a question. So we do these Q&As all the time, and we like helping people out and answering their questions, but we get so many questions that are things like, how many days a week should I do this exercise? Is 4 day a week better than 5 day a week for strength training? Is this kind of exercise better than that kind of exercise? How much volume can I do? How much volume can a beginner do? Questions that are, in fact, impossible to give you a right answer to, at least impossible within the context of this hour-ish long show in which we're going to try and answer 4 or 5 different questions. Yeah. What you need to do, and the reason that we don't answer them, and don't give you the answer that you want. And an example I always use for this, how many days a week should I squat? We could give so many answers in there and justify all of them, but it would be possible that none of them are right for you, the person asking the question, or that the right answer for you now is not the right answer a year from now, 5 years from now, at a different phase in the training, when you're 6 months out from a meet, when you're 2 weeks out from a meet. All of those things change. And that's why we have, I'd like to think, bountiful, plentiful information to answer those seemingly simple questions that actually require a lot of context. So have an entire video series, Scientific Principles of Strength Training, that deals with that. And if you can make sure that the answer to it doesn't violate specificity or overload, then you get all the way down to the seventh principle, individual differences. And so many of the questions that people ask in these type of settings for a podcast like this are questions of individual differences. They're questions that can be answered through understanding how being bigger or smaller affects training frequency, intensity, and volume, how being less experienced or more experienced, how hormones, female, male, enhanced affects those type of things, how the proximity to an athlete's career peak affects those kind of things. So, I don't want to berate the question askers and listeners, because without you, we can't be doing stuff like this, but I do want to encourage you to go beyond trying to find this one seemingly, simple magic bullet answer of 3-day-a-week squatting is the best, or 17-time-a-week squatting is the best, or every other week, or whatever it is, because none of those are right. They might be right for one person in their particular circumstance, but go watch the Scientific Principles video series we have that'll be linked in here. Buy the book, read the book, delve into understanding the principles, because when you understand those, you understand, all the answers, more or less. You understand the answer for you, for your training partner, for athletes that you coach, for future you, for you that's 12 weeks out from meet versus you that's 2 weeks out from a meet, rather than us giving you what would really be a disservice in saying 3-time-a-week squatting is the best.
Right.
High bar squat is always better than low bar squat, that type of thing. So that's why we don't give those type of answers. That's why when I see those type of questions, I cringe a little bit inside, because it's frustrating, because we want to give you more. We want to help you get to a deeper understanding. So hopefully take that advice. Go watch those videos, and then we're going to keep getting deeper and deeper questions that we can give better, more thorough discussion to.
Well, now that we only have 7 people listening anymore, now we've lost all of our followers. On to the next question.
Yes, that reminds me of I saw a message in there from one of our most loyal customers, our man Jeremy David Martin.
Oh. About his wife, yes.
Yeah, so Tara Martin, happy birthday, by the way. I think it was her birthday yesterday as we're recording this.
Okay.
And don't get, I'm pretty sure it was, or maybe it was Jeremy's birthday. It was someone in the Martin families.
Birthday to you anyways.
And your husband loves you very much. You're beautiful. Don't get mad at him for buying so many Juggernaut things, for flying from Vancouver, Canada to New York to go to seminars, Man's committed. Going on to the next question. This goes with Max's book, The Weightlifting Technique Triad. You can get that at store.jtsstrength.com. And in it, he describes this relationship between bar height, time to fixation, so basically speed under the bar, and then the trajectory of the barbell, and also lays out this equation to help assess what is efficient technique, so what is good technique. And in the video that we have by the same title, the Weightlifting Technique Triad video here on our YouTube, it seemed that there was some confusion around the T, the trajectory part of the equation, and how that fits in. Explain that to the people.
So when we're looking at efficiency in lifting, there's really it's a very simple concept. The concept is, do you pull the bar to the minimum height you need to pull it, and then can you fixate it? Can you catch the bar at the lowest point possible based on that minimum height? So, for example, let's say the average lifter is going to pull the bar to about 70% of their own height, and they're going to catch it somewhere around there, a little bit less than that. Once you get to the really advanced level, that number doesn't really change. It's pretty stable. Less advanced, very, very beginner lifters are going to have, they might pull the bar to 100% or more of their height and then catch it at that same level. And so we have somebody who's in a situation where they're pulling the bar really, really high, catching it too high, and basically preventing themselves from lifting more weight because they have to reduce the amount of weight they can put on the bar in order to pull it that high. So that's the efficiency part of the equation. Trajectory, T, is a representation of how accurately the bar moves. Does the bar land in a place that allows you to fix it or to catch it without violating any of the rules of pressing out or having the bar crash on you or stepping forward or backward? The reason that's put in there, the reason that's included, is because we're talking about efficiency. And if you're a lifter who, let's say, is catching the weight and the bar is always a little bit forward, and that prevents you from being able to fix it or able to catch it, despite pulling it to the lowest possible height and getting under it very, very fast, you're still not able to be successful, or your success rate is lowered because you're not actually in the right place. It's necessary to have some factor to represent that. In the book, we talk about, we give a value to T. We assign it that if you're taking a step forward or a step backward, to adjust for the center of gravity of the bar, to, if you catch it forward and you have to take a step or two forward to catch it, that's less efficient than if you don't. Pretty obvious. So to understand T, it's really a matter of, is the bar moving in the right path? Is it landing where it belongs? And is that allowing you to be successful? If you're stepping forward or back, or if you're pressing out because the bar is a little bit forward or a little bit back or whatever it is, then that value is going to be assigned a number, making you less efficient in that category. So it also gives us a chance to say, okay, what's the best bang for our buck to take a beginner lifter and make them a better lifter? Well, if you're taking 3 or 4 steps forward or back, or you always have to run after a bar, first things first is make sure that you're not moving forward and back when you catch your weights. Make sense?
And some exercises that would help with that would be like no hook, no feet.
Yeah, things that are conditional to the lift that prevent you from doing that. When you don't move your feet, as simple as it is, it forces you to have to keep the bar over the area of base. Because if you're moving the bar too far forward and you can't move your feet, then you're not going to make the lift. They're great exercises to help that. No hook, no feet, no contact, those kind of things.
And if you want to learn more about these concepts, make sure to check out Max's book, in which he gives these big exercise indexes of exercises specifically targeted to address trajectory, to improve bar height, to improve time to fixation. So go check that out, Weightlifting Technique Triad by Max Ada. We had a question about what we thought would be my perfect powerlifting federation. We had a episode about this called, I think, Making Powerlifting More Competitive a couple months ago. So check that one out for sure. So just like kind of quick of the way I'd like to see it. And Max and I, make plenty of jokes about powerlifting and stuff, but I enjoy it. I competed mostly raw with wraps. I started powerlifting in late 2010, and raw powerlifting was nothing like what it is now. It was very small. It was smaller probably than multiply lifting at that time, and all of powerlifting was tiny. It's grown tenfold probably, if not more now. So when I started powerlifting, raw with wraps was kind of that was the thing for raw lifting. Sleeves, and really, I guess more for me, it was looking at the Powerlifting Watch records and down the list and seeing the wraps records versus the sleeves records, and the names on the wraps records were John Cole, Don Reinhout, Larry Pacifico, people who I was like, those are the names I know. Granted, I had never been to a powerlifting meet before I did my first meet, so I wasn't this aficionado or anything, but those were names that I knew, and I figured those are the best guys. I want to try and break those records. So I started out with wraps. But if I was, trying to create this unifying best powerlifting federation possible setup now, it would be in sleeves. It would be a combo rack with sleeves, walked out. And people rally about how the monolift is so much safer and stuff. I mean, fuck, we saw Daniel Bell's fingers get chopped off and the straps 2 years ago at the U.S. Open. The straps would have to be adjusted every single squat to really make it safer. I think from a spotting standpoint, if you have good spotters, you're just as safe in a combo rack as you are in a monolift. Because those kind of catastrophic injuries, someone blows their knees out, a la Brandon Lilly type of thing. Spotters aren't gonna catch it. They're not gonna save it. But Brandon was not injured worse because he wasn't in a monolift. It's not like the weight fell on top of him or anything. So right. I think, and from a spectator standpoint too, combo rack is more appealing. It's better to watch because
you can see more.
Yeah, you can see more, and you don't have that extra person in front who's operating the hooks. So I'd go sleeves, walked out, and then we've talked so much about failed drug tests in weightlifting and everything. It would be untested. It would be an untested federation, because if you want to make it fair, tell people that they can do whatever they want. That is one good thing, I guess, about powerlifting, is it gives so many options that there's no excuse for someone to test positive in a tested federation. That person's just an asshole. They should have just gone to the untested federation, because it's just, it's the same thing to just go and compete there. It's there's no glory in going to the USAPL and the IPF and trying to beat drug tested people. And I'm sure people are watching this, well, all those people are on drugs anyways. No, they're not. Okay, they're not. They're catching the people who are on drugs. Not everyone is on drugs in that. So if you're on drugs, go compete untested. But if there was only going to be one federation, it's going to be more fun if it was untested, and not the untested nature of international weightlifting, which listen to our Future of Weightlifting podcast, and we talk about some of those issues in there. And then sort of the format of it. You look at the Ed Cohens of the world, the Don Reinhouts, John Cuck, these people who won, Larry Pacifico, who won world championships. Now, every year there's 500 lifters winning a world championship. But when there's 500 lifters winning a world championship, none of them are a real fucking world championship. Marissa won IPF Worlds this year, and that is the highest, most true international competition that there can be at this point in powerlifting, but it's certainly not all of the lifters in the world. So what I think would be the most interesting would be, the people with the money would have to make it happen. The people running big dogs, the people running U.S. Open, the people running record breakers, these different things, to create some sort of unified front. And I know as I say this that none of it's going to happen, but I think having some almost more tournament style type of thing where you could have prelim meets, break the world up into regions, similarly to CrossFit, but less regions, maybe 3 regions. And you have a prelim meet in the Americas, the Europe region, and the Australia, Southeast Asia, or Australia-Asia region. And then the top number of whatever go on to a semifinal meet, one in the U.S. and one in Europe, 16 weeks after that first meet, and then 16 weeks after the semifinal meet. You take the top 4 finishers from America, the top 4 finishers from the other region, and you combine, plus maybe a couple at-larges, and you take them all to one meet that has a shitload of money at the end of it. There are other things I go into that if I was doing that, and Pro Raw does this in Australia, where I've competed a few times. They have different weight classes. They do 2-hour weigh-ins. They have fewer weight classes, so they force more people to compete head to head, and that's really the heart of sport, is head to head competition. So if you
for sure, the competition thing has to get more.
Because these people can make big lifts, but they're making them in their backyard meets and stuff. It's much different to go and do it head to head. The same judging, the same circumstance. So that's would be the perfect world of powerlifting. I think is meets and sleeves, walked out, untested but 2-hour weigh-in. Unified judging, because honestly, even if the judging at the Australia prelim meet was looser than the one at the American prelim meet, maybe some records get set in that shit, but it's all going to even out when they get to the same judges at the end of it, and where there's the money on the line. So if you want to hear more about that, check out the episode Making Powerlifting More Competitive. Maybe is from 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next thing, there was a lot of questions about training for masters and how should training change as you get older. This is a little bit like what I was going on about before about how to ask a question and the principle of individual differences. First off, you gotta understand.
Guys, Chad's gonna yeah.
You gotta understand that not all masters are created equal. Marissa just turned 41. She's been training seriously since she was 17, and then had the gymnastics background before that. So 30 years of serious fitness and strength training. But you could have another person, 41 years old, same weight class, same, all the other circumstances the same, who's been training for 3 years or for 6 months. And so, again, we can't make these blanket recommendations for masters because there's Dave Ricks, and then there's, your Uncle Bill, who just started squatting, 3 weeks ago. I can't make the same recommendations for them. But you're in luck that we do have a video that goes more in depth with this. It's geared towards masters weightlifting, but really the principles apply across the board. It's called Considerations for Masters Lifters. It's with Max and his wife, the master of disaster, Joanne Ada. So make sure you check that out. But, if you're looking at it for yourself, how you're going to train when you're 40 compared to when you were 30 and when you were 20, your MRV is probably lower. You probably can't train quite as frequently. You probably need a little bit less frequent overloading. You probably need to pay a little bit more attention to fatigue management, whether that's recovery adaptive strategies or just better warm-ups and prehab type of movements. And then as you look at your clients, again, speaking in generalities, and you have a 50-year-old who's been training for 2 years, and you have a 30-year-old who's been training for 2 years, those same type of considerations would be made. The 30-year-old can probably tolerate a little bit higher volume than the 50-year-old, probably a little bit more frequent overloading. But it's not training that's going to change by type. It's going to be training that changes by magnitude, by dosage. Keep that in mind. Make sure to check out Considerations for Masters Lifters. And if you're a Masters weightlifter, Max actually has an online coaching program specifically designed for Masters weightlifters. You had how many people at Masters World Games this year?
We had about 6.
And five of those were medalists, and
5 were medal, a bunch of world records, Olympic record, or what? Olympic Masters World Game records,
international medals, some would call them.
International medals.
Yes.
Yeah. Masters medals.
Yes.
Let's make sure.
International
accurate.
Masters medals. International Masters of Mystery. All right. Last question is about training the opposite technique. So what is the efficacy of conventional deadlifters training sumo, low bar squatters training high bar, and then Max will touch on it for some weightlifting movements too. As far as sumo deadlifters, Max and I both have sumo deadlifters train a lot of conventional. As we look at the 3 phases that we take people through in our phasic structure of hypertrophy, strength, and peaking, during hypertrophy, it's pretty much 100% conventional training for the sumo deadlifter. That's because the conventional deadlift is going to build more. It's going to build more muscle size and strength in the hamstrings, the glutes, and the low back, the muscles that make the deadlift go. And then as you get into the other phases, in strength, I go about 50-50 sumo to conventional, maybe a little bit more sumo. And then in peaking, it's 100% sumo. So you build the muscle size, then you're developing the strength of those muscles while also transitioning into improving the technique, and then finally you're honing the technique. Because if you have someone who can squat well, and Kristen Dunsmore is a perfect example of this, and if you watch my analysis video of her last meet where she broke the American record in the squat, I talk about this more, but she had a back injury previously, and her back was relatively weak compared to her legs, which are very, very strong. She squatted 381 at 138. So we did all conventional during hypertrophy. Her conventional deadlift weights went up by almost 100 pounds during that time. But as we got closer and closer to the meet, there was inconsistencies in the technique and some frustrations there, and she got, Spicy Wesley yelling at her for not being diligent enough in some of those things. But what I had to keep reminding her of was, are your legs, ask her, are your legs strong? Yes. She's squatted 163 kilos for a triple, 142 kilos for a set of 8, broke the American record in the squat. Obviously, your legs are strong. Well, is your back stronger? Yes. Your conventional deadlift weights went up by nearly 100 pounds. So if you got strong legs and strong back and you want to be a good sumo deadlifter, the next thing you need is technique. So it's all about it coming together late for that. But the other side of that coin is pulling sumo useful for a conventional deadlifter, and it's certainly not nearly as useful as conventional is for a sumo deadlifter. Maybe it's going to build some hip strength. It could potentially improve the lockout a bit. But I think if anything, the sumo deadlift for the conventional deadlifter is more just variation for variation's sake, to avoid staleness, to avoid adaptive resistance. With squatting, the high bar is kind of the same situation. We have people who squat low bar in competition. They do a ton of high bar squatting throughout their training because the high bar squat builds the strength and size of the quads. It tolerates higher volume and higher frequency training than the low bar squat. It doesn't interfere with bench press training the same way. It doesn't interfere with deadlift training the same way. So our low bar squatters will train a ton of high bar. Conversely to that, we do not have people who squat high bar. And I have one or two guys who squat high bar in competition, but let's say weightlifters, who aren't competing in the squat but are training exclusively high bar and front squat, we don't have them doing any low bar squat. There's not a beneficial carryover, despite what some people who have never actually coached weightlifters would lead you to believe. But, with the exception of Mary Peck, who's a great lifter and does do low bar squats.
Yeah. That's for weightlifting, and it's not as common a question because I think weightlifters are more used to the idea of doing different exercises, and their competitive technique is generally not much different. No one's doing like split snatches in a meet and splits and squat lifts during training or whatever. Like I can do as much in the split snatch as I can in the squat snatch. So it's not as common in weightlifting to have that same question asked, but there is, a case to be made in cases where someone maybe does, God forbid, they do a push jerk or power jerk, whatever you want to call it, in a competition versus a split jerk. And there is a lot of merit to training those exercises in your training program. If you do a split jerk, you're going to probably do some form of power jerk in training on some level. You can do things like the opposite leg jerk, but most of those are done as a accessory movement that really isn't as big a discrepancy as conventional deadlifting versus sumo deadlifting. But again, for the same reasons, right? Adaptive resistance, variety. Maybe there's some technical benefits from certain things that you would do.
I would think too, maybe power jerk or push jerk could tolerate a bit. If you're going to do one clean plus 5 jerks or something, a couple of those might be push jerks.
Yeah. It's like, there's other things too, for developing really good sense of the bar and developing, better trajectory. Doing a push jerk without moving your feet is a great exercise to do that. You're forcing yourself to become better at the movement and better at where you belong. Its transference to split jerk is probably less so than, not very significant. But in general for the weightlifting, one thing I thought was interesting is if you look at conventional deadlifting and sumo deadlifting, and people that pull sumo, and both you and I are very similar in that they're probably only going to pull sumo for the latter part of the training cycle. If you pull conventional in a meet, you might only pull sumo once in a month or once every couple months to practice it, to do it as a extra variety.
Yeah, I mean that's for me that's more like fun time off season.
Yes,
for people.
Yeah. if even that, right? Your total time in doing it might be a few workouts in a year, right? Just for fun. I don't think there's a huge benefit to doing sumo to develop a lockout, just because it's just such a different position. It's a different movement, right? And it's going to be much easier to lock out your hips in that position than it would be from a conventional deadlift if if your hips roll under you or whatever. But yeah.
Have you ever seen someone do split clean to squat jerk in a meet?
Well, not in a meet, but I've seen a guy. We got to find this video. Maybe Shorty can find this, but there's a video of a guy. It was an Asian lifter. This is about 4 years ago. Cleans the weight.
I know the one you're talking about.
Does a split jerk, and he stumbles forward, and then steps down and squats down into a overhead squat, and then steps forward and recovers.
The split to squat jerk.
Yeah, goes in from a split jerk into a squat jerk, and then recovers and makes the lift.
The splat jerk.
Yeah.
What about Ilya doing that?
A fellow doing a fantastic clean plus squat jerk with a tremendous load.
What about that Ilya squat jerk video that Hook Grip put up not too long ago? What was it? 240, 245?
245 squat jerk, and it was man, that's something else.
And that was, I guess, only a couple of weeks before his 246 world record, right?
Yeah.
And
he said that was his best lift. There's an interview with him later where he said he never actually went above that. He only did 245 as his PR. Or 246. 246 is his PR, but he had never done it's not like he'd done 260.
Yeah, I know. He had jerked 250 from the rack.
Yeah.
And cleaned 250 separately.
That's just crazy. I mean, that level, it gives you a good sense of the level of athleticism the man has.
Yes. And that for people watching at home and who use Hook Grip Instagram to guide their training program, do not watch that and think, well, Ilya does squat jerks 2 weeks out from a meet, even though he does split jerks in the meet. I should do that too. He's not doing that to break the world record. He breaks the world record because he can do that. And so much of that too, like when Max is talking about his athleticism, besides us seeing him do these seemingly 50% effort broad jumps across the width of the competition platform, like 11-foot broad jumps, wearing weightlifting shoes, cold, just frog hopping from one side to the other. That a lot of that was created by his, and again, quote through the translator, I used to run around the gym and do all the exercises.
Yeah.
Every day for 10 years. Tremendous general movement qualities, coordination, incredible strength, spatial awareness, everything. If anyone who's in that English class with him in Boston is watching, there's a really badass dude in your, who's listening to Rosetta Stone next to you. So those are our questions for today. We have a lot of seminars coming up, starting August 26th and 27th, or maybe it's 25th and 20. I think it's 26th and 27th. Max and I will be in Buffalo, New York. 26th and 27th in Buffalo, New York. Mustache Fitness and Barbell. Doing our first Super Total clinic. And what that really means is a weightlifting clinic one day and a powerlifting clinic the next day. But we will be talking at both of them about how to combine powerlifting and weightlifting into one training program for the superest of totals. Check that out. Spots available both days. After that, I will be in Philadelphia, September 16th. The Sunday event, which is the hands-on technique coaching on the 17th, is sold out. Stop asking me if you can add it. You can't. But on the 16th, I'll be giving a programming lecture about all the principles and how they are practically applied to design effective powerlifting training, phasic structure, hypertrophy, strength peaking for beginner to advanced athletes, male, female, big, small, all things in between. After that, Max will be in Santa Barbara. Beautiful, beautiful place, Santa Barbara. September 30th. What's the name of the gym there?
Santa Barbara CrossFit.
Santa Barbara CrossFit. Creative name. Email Max at JTS Strength about that. After that, Max and Pomp will be in Rochester, New York at, what's the gym there?
What is the gym? Shoot. Pump's good the name.
Whatever. You can find that at store.jtsstrength.com. That'll be a one-day clinic combining lecture about program design as well as hands-on coaching for technique. And then after that, on October 28th, Marissa and I will be in Minneapolis, Minnesota, home of Gordon Bombay. And he clicked maybe on the RSVP. Goldberg, unfortunately, will not be able to attend as he was just arrested for theft. Hate to see the child.
Wait, was he?
Yeah, hate to see the child stars go off the rails there. Goldberg, Lindsay Lohan, it's bad. But again, the Sunday session with the hands-on technique coaching is sold out. Stop asking if you can sign up late for that part. You would be like the 15th person on the wait list for it at this point. But Saturday, programming lecture, how to make good programs for all types of powerlifters. Check that out. Maybe it's just me, but I actually think that the lecture part is more useful and more valuable than the technique coaching part, because the technique of powerlifting is not that complex. It's nice to get it coached in person by experts, I suppose we are. But the programming stuff will last you. Understanding those principles, that makes decades of training more effective. So, check out those clinics. And if you're interested in hosting clinics, go ahead and shoot us an email at support at jtsstrength.com, and we can set something up. Online coaching, visit juggernautcoaching.com. People are they're doing awesome. I am constantly enthused to go in the club powerlifting, team powerlifting groups and see great reviews from people. We have powerlifting, weightlifting, and super total coaching all at various levels. Club coaching is really just one program for the whole group. Probably not the best choice for if you're getting ready for a meet, but is very fun, very supportive group, and very effective. Training is just not going to be customized for you as an individual. Team is the next step up from that. Team also has its own private Facebook group where you're getting coached by myself, Marissa, and Kristen for powerlifting, Max and Pomp for weightlifting. And those are essentially templates that Max and I have written to fit every type, to fit frequency, experience, ability of the lifter. For weightlifting, technique bias, strength bias. For powerlifting, to fit hypertrophy, strength, or peaking goals. So while it might not be customized for you, Johnny Smith watching this, it is customized for 5-day-a-week training, intermediate male hypertrophy, or 5-day-a-week training, beginner female strength bias, like needs to develop more strength than technique. And then, of course, one-on-one is the most fully customized to you, Johnny Smith, if you're watching, or Jenny Smith could also do it. Besides that, subscribe to our YouTube. We're always proud of the content we put up here. The best in fitness content on YouTube, the PBS of fitness YouTube. All thanks to the world's strongest videographer, Shorty Sedang. And besides that, if you enjoy the podcast, go on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. You can also find The Jug Life now on Spotify, as well as Stitcher, Google Play, and thejuglife.com. But we like the funny reviews. We appreciate the 5-star reviews. It helps move us up those iTunes charts so more people can find us, can learn from us, can hopefully enjoy our nonsensical skits and ramblings about high squats and positive drug tests. He's Max Ada, Max_Ada on Instagram, Max Ada on Facebook, Max at jtsstrength.com. I'm Chad Wesley Smith at Chad Wesley Smith and at Juggernaut Training on Facebook and Instagram, filling up your news feed all day. Thanks for watching or listening, and we'll see you next week.